Daniel Brooks had worked at Harrison Industrial Systems for almost 9 years without a single disciplinary warning. At 8:29 on a cold Chicago morning, the chief executive officer fired him for arriving 14 minutes late without allowing him to explain that his 8-year-old daughter had spent the morning at an urgent care clinic. Daniel stood on the production floor holding his employee badge while coworkers stared at the machines instead of the decision happening in front of them. The morning had begun at 5:40 when Emily woke with a fever and sharp pain in one ear. Daniel called the nurse line, then drove her to a clinic that opened at 7. The physician diagnosed an ear infection, prescribed medication, and instructed her to remain home. Daniel called his supervisor at 7:45, left a detailed voicemail, and arranged for Mrs. Alvarez, an authorized caregiver who lived next door, to stay with Emily after the pharmacy opened. Daniel had raised Emily alone since his wife, Sarah, died 5 years earlier. Sarah had been a public school counselor who believed children should never carry adult guilt. When illness or work changed the family plan, Daniel explained what would happen without suggesting Emily had caused the difficulty. At Harrison, Daniel was known for the same steadiness. He had joined as a maintenance engineer and grown into responsibility for heat treatment equipment, pumps, and mechanical reliability. He arrived early because shift handovers mattered, not because punctuality was a performance. During 9 years, one winter storm had made him late by 6 minutes. His supervisor recorded the delay, but issued no discipline because Daniel had called before the shift. His value did not come from perfect attendance alone. He had led a furnace controls upgrade that cut energy consumption, found a recurring lubrication error before it damaged a critical gearbox, and trained operators to recognize early mechanical warnings. Annual reviews placed him among the strongest engineers at the plant. Daniel also had limits. He declined 2 travel-heavy promotions because they would keep him away from Emily for weeks. He accepted slower advancement rather than pretending another person could replace his role at home. The decision reduced his income but protected the life he had deliberately chosen. That history existed inside Harrison's records on the morning Claire saw one late arrival. She did not ask for it. She treated a timestamp as the complete story. At 8:10, he helped his daughter settle beneath a blanket. "I'm sorry you were late because of me," Emily said. "Never apologize for needing your father. I called work. We will handle the rest." Traffic and the pharmacy delay pushed him past his 8:15 start. He called again from the truck, but his supervisor was already inside an emergency leadership briefing and did not answer. Claire Harrison arrived at the plant without notice at 8:20. She had founded Harrison Industrial Systems and built it into a respected manufacturer through clear standards, careful execution, and little patience for excuses. The plant had recently missed deadlines, and an internal report blamed inconsistent shift attendance. Claire entered determined to demonstrate accountability. The report was narrower than she understood. It showed a rise in late clock-ins, but did not separate whether transportation failures, approved caregiving leave, or repeated misconduct. One department accounted for most delays because a schedule change no longer matched the first commuter bus. Plant management had requested a transit review, but the recommendation sat in an operations queue. Claire read only the executive summary before arriving. She had spent 15 years solving crises by making decisions faster than competitors. Speed helped when customers needed an answer or financing threatened to collapse. Over time, decisiveness became part of her identity. People praised her for entering a confused room and leaving with a direction. The same strength had developed a dangerous edge. Managers learned that bringing uncertainty to Claire could look like weakness. Meetings moved quickly because people edited complications before she heard them. She believed silence meant agreement and clean reports meant control. That morning, Claire wanted employees to see that standards applied in front of the chief executive officer. The production floor became a stage before Daniel ever entered it. Once she noticed him late, she felt pressure to perform the decisive leadership everyone expected. The decision that followed was not caused by policy. It was caused by a leader using a person to send a message before learning whether the message was true. She saw Daniel hurry through the security gate at 8:29. "Your shift began 14 minutes ago," she said before he reached his station. "Yes. My daughter had a medical emergency. I call my supervisor at 7:45. If you allow me 1 minute." The explanation does not change the time. The production floor grew still. Daniel's supervisor stepped forward. "Claire, I have not checked my voicemail." "Daniel has never." She raised a hand. "Standards lose meaning when we negotiate them in public. Human resources will begin immediate separation." The plant's policy required fact-finding and progressive discipline for attendants unless there was serious misconduct. Claire had authority to terminate employees, but authority did not make bypassing the process fair. Daniel removed his badge. "I hope one day you never have to choose between your child and your job." "This is not the place for a speech," Claire replied. "No, it should have been the place for a question." He handed the badge to Human Resources and left. Before the day ended, Claire would be stranded on an industrial road with a dead phone and discover that the employee she refused to hear was the only driver willing to stop. Daniel sat inside his pickup for several minutes before starting the engine. Anger came in waves, followed by fear. Rent was current, but savings covered only 6 weeks. Emily needed antibiotics, and their health insurance would end if the termination stood. He called Mrs. Alvarez, confirmed his daughter was resting, and promised to return with medicine and soup. He did not tell Emily he had lost his job. The information belonged in a calm conversation after her fever eased, not in a frightened telephone call. Inside the plant, the Human Resources Director, Megan Collins, asked Claire to pause the separation. "The attendance policy requires review," Megan said. "Daniel has a clean record, and his supervisor may have prior notice." "I witnessed the violation." "You witnessed his arrival time. You did not review the reason or the policy." Claire disliked the distinction because it was accurate. Still, she believed reversing herself immediately would weaken leadership in front of the plant. "Complete the paperwork," she said. "We will review any appeal he submits." Megan documented her objection and notified the Employment Council. No one deleted Daniel's voicemail. No one had listened to it yet. Claire spent the afternoon reviewing production forecasts, but Daniel's final sentence interrupted every page. She told herself consistency protected the workforce. She did not ask whether consistency without fact-finding protected anyone at all. At 6:10, she left the plant alone. Cold drizzle coated the roads, and traffic thinned near a warehouse district. A warning light appeared on her dashboard. Seconds later, the engine lost power. Claire guided the sedan onto a narrow shoulder and tried to restart it. The battery clicked once. Her phone displayed 2% charge and no reliable signal. She activated the hazard lights and remained inside with the doors locked while attempting roadside assistance. 3 vehicles passed. The 4th was Daniel's pickup. He was returning from the pharmacy with Emily's medicine secured beside a container of soup. He recognized the disabled sedan only after pulling ahead. For several seconds, he kept driving. Then he remembered Emily asking why people should stop for strangers when professionals existed. Daniel had told her that stopping did not always mean fixing the danger yourself. Sometimes it meant creating enough safety for professional help to arrive. He turned at the next legal entrance and approached from behind with hazard lights active. He parked at a safe distance and called through the closed passenger window. "Are you injured?" Claire recognized him. Surprise gave way to embarrassment. "No, the car lost power, and my phone is dying. Keep the doors locked. I will call a tow service and give them the location." Daniel did not attempt a roadside repair beside traffic. He used his phone to request assistance, placed a reflective warning marker behind her vehicle, and offered a portable charger through a partially open window. The tow dispatcher estimated 40 minutes. Daniel sent Mrs. Alvarez a message explaining the delay and asked her to give Emily the first antibiotic dose with food if he did not return on time. Mrs. Alvarez confirmed the instructions from the pharmacy label. Claire heard the exchange and realized his assistance carried another cost. He had medicine waiting for a sick child. She offered to call another driver so he could leave. "The tow is coming, and you are inside a locked vehicle," Daniel said. Once your phone has enough power and the dispatcher confirms the truck is close, I will go. I'm not responsible for solving every part of this. His boundary mattered. He did not sacrifice Emily's care to prove goodness, and he did not make Claire's safety depend entirely on him. He created a reasonable bridge to professional help. The charger restored enough power for Claire to share her live location with the tow company and Megan. Daniel checked that the warning marker remained upright, then waited inside his own truck where both vehicles were visible. They spoke through open windows rather than standing near traffic. The scene contained none of the intimacy Claire might later remember. It was cold, inconvenient, and practical. That made Daniel's choice harder to turn into a sentimental excuse for what she had done. You can keep it until the tow arrives. After this morning, you could have continued driving. I considered it. Claire looked down. What changed your mind? You needing help did not become less true because you treated me unfairly. Helping you does not make what happened acceptable. Both facts can exist. The answer denied her an easy story about forgiveness. Daniel was helping because of his values, not because Claire deserved reassurance. He crossed to a convenience store using the pedestrian signal and returned with 2 sealed cups of coffee. Claire paid for hers electronically after the charger restored her phone. Daniel did not turn the purchase into a gift she could misunderstand. While they waited, Claire said, "I should have listened." Yes, I believed exceptions weaken standards. Listening is not granting an exception. It is how you learn whether the rule even applies. The tow truck's lights appeared in the distance. Claire wanted a promise that everything would be corrected. She stopped herself. She had not reviewed the facts, consulted human resources, or asked what Daniel wanted. May human resources contact you tomorrow? They may contact me about the termination. Do not ask them to call this roadside help part of my employment record. I will not. Daniel retrieved his charger after the tow driver connected Claire's vehicle. He returned to his pickup and drove home. Claire watched the taillights disappear. By sunrise, the voicemail her team had ignored would turn a harsh decision into a documented failure of leadership and company process. At home, Daniel gave Emily her medicine, heated soup, and waited until she felt stronger before explaining that he no longer worked at Harrison. "Because you took me to the doctor?" she asked. "Because the chief executive officer made a decision before hearing what happened. The mistake belongs to the adults handling the decision, not to you. Will you get the job back?" "I do not know. Tomorrow I will ask for the process in writing. Tonight we follow the doctor's plan and rest." Emily studied him. "You helped the lady anyway." "Yes." "Does that mean you forgave her?" "It means I did not leave someone unsafe. Forgiveness and employment decisions need more time." The distinction allowed Emily to sleep without believing kindness required immediate trust. Claire arrived at headquarters before 7. Megan, employment counsel, and the board's people committee chair joined her. They listened to Daniel's first voicemail. The timestamp was 7:45. He clearly identified a pediatric emergency, said he expected to be late, and promised an update. The second call appeared in the log at 8:19. His file showed 8 years and 11 months of strong performance, no attendance warnings, and multiple safety commendations. The policy allowed emergency leave and required supervisors to gather facts before discipline. Claire had violated both the process and the standard she claimed to defend. "Rescind the termination," she said. Employment counsel stopped her. "We can withdraw the decision and offer reinstatement with back pay. Daniel decides whether to return. We also need to investigate how you overrode policy and why no one felt able to stop the action." Claire accepted the correction. The board chair opened a formal review. Megan contacted Daniel through the personal information he had authorized for employment communication. She did not disclose his address to Claire or send anyone to his home. Daniel requested a meeting by video first. He asked for the termination letter, policy, voicemail record, benefit status, and appeal options. Human Resources provided them. His insurance was temporarily continued while the dispute remained open. He also requested an employee advocate at any in-person meeting. Harrison agreed. 2 days later, Daniel entered a neutral conference room with a union representative from the plant's employee council. Claire attended with Megan and employment counsel. I made a decision before reviewing your explanation or the policy, Claire said. I interrupted you publicly and terminated you without the process every employee is owed. I was wrong. I apologize. Daniel asked whether the plant supervisor or human resources staff would be blamed for failing to stop her. No, Claire answered. The review is examining why my authority discouraged challenge. Megan documented her objection. Your supervisor tried to speak. The decision was mine. Harrison offered reinstatement to Daniel's former engineering position, full back pay, restored seniority, no disciplinary record, and reimbursement of reasonable costs caused by the termination. It did not include a promotion. Why no promotion? The employee advocate asked. Megan answered, a promotion should follow an open, evidence-based process. Attaching it to an apology would create another unfair decision. Daniel appreciated the distinction. He requested 5 business days to decide and asked for a written correction placed wherever the termination notice had been distributed. Claire agreed. The company had offered to reverse the harm. Daniel's next decision would determine whether correction was strong enough to make returning possible. Daniel spoke with former co-workers, reviewed other job openings, and considered whether trust could exist after public humiliation. Several co-workers wanted him back, but warned that Claire's leadership style had made employees reluctant to explain problems. Returning meant entering the same culture, not merely recovering a paycheck. He submitted 3 conditions that applied beyond himself. First, the company would publish a clear emergency notification process. Second, managers would receive training on fact-finding before discipline. Third, employees could request review by someone outside their reporting line when a senior executive initiated discipline. Harrison did not accept the terms as a private bargain. The People Committee evaluated them with employee representatives and legal counsel. The company agreed to implement an interim process while a broader policy was designed. Daniel returned after 6 workdays. His first morning was not a celebration. Human Resources corrected the record, restored access, and paid the missed wages. Claire did not gather employees for a speech or ask Daniel to stand beside her. The plant manager welcomed him at a regular shift meeting and explained only that the termination had been rescinded after review. Some co-workers applauded. Daniel thanked them and began his work. Returning was more difficult than walking through the door. Co-workers repeatedly asked what Claire had promised him. Some assumed a promotion was coming. Others warned him that forgiving leadership too quickly would weaken every employee's position. Daniel corrected both stories. I accepted reinstatement, back pay, and a written correction, he told his team. I did not sign away the right to challenge what happened. His supervisor, Marcus Lee, carried guilt for failing to stop Claire. Daniel reminded him that Marcus had tried to speak, then asked what would make intervention more effective next time. They agreed. Supervisors needed authority to call an immediate human resources pause when executive instructions conflicted with policy. The first opportunity came 1 week later. A regional vice president demanded that an hourly technician receive a written warning for leaving a shift after a child care center closed unexpectedly. Marcus paused the discipline, confirmed the employee had notified the central line, and sent the case to review. The absence qualified for emergency time. No dramatic meeting followed. The technician kept her record clean, and production used a backup staffing plan. A new process proved itself through an ordinary case before anyone praised it. Daniel also requested that his co-workers stop telling the story as if he had returned because Claire became kind. The correction occurred because Megan preserved the voicemail, employment counsel enforced procedure. The board reviewed executive conduct, and employee representatives demanded terms that could apply to everyone. Trust began to return when systems worked without requiring Daniel to be present. Claire's formal review concluded that she had bypassed policy, discouraged challenge, and created inconsistent discipline. The board issued a reprimand, reduced part of her annual incentive, and required leadership coaching. Immediate termination authority for attendance matters was delegated to a documented process involving human resources. The finding became part of company records. Claire could not transform accountability into a private apology no one else could verify. The board also examined executive decision rights. Claire retained authority for genuine emergencies, fraud, violence, and immediate safety threats. Routine performance and attendance actions required human resources review, even when she personally observed the event. An executive could place someone on paid administrative leave when facts were unclear, but final discipline followed documented process. Some directors worried the limits would slow urgent decisions. Employment counsel distinguished speed from finality. A company could protect people and operations immediately without deciding guilt in the same minute. Claire began leadership coaching with recordings of her own meetings taken with participant knowledge. The coach counted how often she interrupted, answered her own questions, or treated requests for more data as resistance. Claire discovered that employees rarely challenged her second statement after she rejected the first. She practiced asking the quietest person in the room what information remained missing. At first, managers offered polite agreement. Trust had to be rebuilt through repeated evidence that disagreement would not damage careers. During a supplier review, a junior analyst questioned Claire's preferred contract because currency exposure had been underestimated. The old meeting pattern might have ended the objection quickly. Claire asked the analyst to show the model. The correction changed the contract terms and prevented a significant risk. Claire credited the analyst in the decision record rather than using the event as proof of her own humility. One successful challenge did not change culture. It gave other employees a reason to try the next one. The board tracked meeting surveys, overridden human resources decisions, appeal outcomes, and employee confidence in speaking up. Claire's improvement would be evaluated through those measures at year-end. Leadership growth became an obligation with evidence, not a personal story she could declare complete. The immediate crisis had ended. Then the policy team discovered that Daniel's case was not the only family emergency handled inconsistently across Harrison sites. An audit of 2 years of attendance actions found managers used different standards. Some accepted a telephone call without documentation. Others demanded medical details employees were not required to disclose. Hourly workers on night shifts had fewer ways to notify supervisors. Caregivers for elderly relatives were less likely to receive flexibility than parents of young children. Harrison formed a policy group including hourly employees, supervisors, human resources, privacy counsel, and workers with caregiving responsibilities. Daniel participated as a paid member during work hours, not as the symbolic victim of Claire's mistake. The group created a family and personal emergency response policy. Employees notified a central line or supervisor as soon as reasonably possible. They did not need to reveal a diagnosis. Short emergencies used available paid time or a limited emergency bank. Repeated patterns could be reviewed, but no discipline occurred before fact-finding and an opportunity to respond. Designing the central line exposed practical problems. The first version required an employee number and a spoken message in English. Workers calling from noisy emergency rooms or without the number available could not complete the report. The system added text, web, and multilingual options. A caller could identify the site, shift, and expected update time without describing private medical facts. Supervisors received an alert showing only information needed to cover the shift. Medical documents, when legally necessary, went to human resources rather than production management. Access logs recorded who viewed them. The emergency bank began with 24 paid hours per year, separate from vacation. Employee representatives argued that one serious event could consume it immediately. Finance warned that a larger bank might become unsustainable. The pilot used 24 hours plus a voluntary leave-sharing option with privacy protections. No employee had to name the recipient of donated time. Coverage also mattered. A compassionate absence policy could still burden coworkers if staffing remained too lean. Harrison trained cross-functional relief teams and paid them for maintaining required certifications. Plants created minimum staffing plans before emergencies occurred. During a night shift test, the central line routed an alert to a manager whose phone was off. The employee believed the absence had been reported, while the plant saw an unexplained vacancy. The audit log found the failure. Alerts were changed to escalate until a human acknowledged receipt and employees received confirmation codes. Daniel compared the improvement to machinery alarms. A signal sent is not the same as a signal received, he said. The system needs confirmation. The group published examples of approved and unapproved, used without identifying individuals. Employees could see that emergency leave covered sudden care, transportation breakdown tied to immediate safety, and urgent household events. Planned appointments still used normal scheduling whenever possible. The policy became clearer because workers challenged it before a crisis forced interpretation. Managers worried employees would misuse the policy. Employee representatives worried verification would become surveillance. The group tested scenarios: a child's sudden illness, an elderly parent's fall, a transportation breakdown, repeated Monday absences, and an employee unable to call during an emergency. The final process separated immediate safety from later review. A supervisor first covered the work and confirmed the employee was safe. Documentation, if necessary, came later and focused on timing or need for leave, not private medical details. A 6-month pilot began at 2 plants. During the first month, use increased sharply because employees finally understood the options. Finance interpreted the increase as abuse. The policy group compared overtime, turnover, absenteeism, and unresolved disciplinary cases. Most requests involved less than 1 shift and were reported correctly. One employee submitted 3 emergencies that did not match time records. The company reviewed the pattern, heard his explanation, and found he had been using emergency leave to attend a second job. He received discipline through the same documented process. Compassion did not eliminate accountability. It prevented accountability from becoming assumption. Another employee failed to call before a shift because she was inside an emergency room with her father. Location records were not demanded. A hospital admission timestamp and her call after the crisis were enough. Her absence was approved. At the end of the pilot, unplanned overtime fell slightly, appeals declined, and employees reported greater willingness to notify supervisors early. Harrison expanded the policy company-wide. The expansion revealed a weakness the pilot sites had missed. At Harrison's rural assembly plant, several employees lived in areas with unreliable cellular service. The central line accepted their calls, but confirmation messages sometimes arrived after the shift had begun. One supervisor treated 2 delayed confirmations as unreported absences and issued warnings. The warnings reached Daniel's policy group on a Friday afternoon. Operations wanted to correct the 2 records quietly and continue the rollout. Daniel objected. If a system failure could be hidden through individual exceptions, nobody would know how many employees remained exposed. The rollout paused for 48 hours while information technology traced the message path. Call timestamps were accurate. The failure occurred in the outbound text service. The group added an automated voice confirmation, a web option, and a wallet card listing a backup number. Employees could choose the channel that worked where they lived. Supervisors were forbidden to discipline an absence until the notification log and escalation record had been checked. Both warnings were withdrawn in writing. The affected employees received paid time for meetings needed to repair their records. Harrison also reviewed every warning issued during the first rollout week and found one additional case involving a night employee whose name had been entered under the wrong badge number. That discovery produced a harder question. Who had authority to stop a company-wide policy launched by senior leadership? The board approved a standing rule. Human resources, information security, or an employee representative could request a temporary hold when a control failed. The request triggered a rapid review. It did not require permission from the executive who sponsored the program. Claire supported the rule, even though it limited her own authority. At the rural plant, the policy group held 2 paid sessions on different shifts. Employees tested every notification route from the parking lot, the break room, and nearby roads where reception often disappeared. Their feedback led to printed confirmation numbers that could be written down during a call and verified later. When the rollout resumed, the group published the failure, the affected records, and the correction without naming employees. Trust did not rise because Harrison claimed the new policy was flawless. It rose because the company exposed a flaw before asking workers to rely on the system again. Daniel's return also exposed technical work that had stalled during his absence. He was a senior mechanical engineer responsible for a heat treatment line that had begun producing uneven temperature profiles. Contractors blamed aging burners. Daniel reviewed 9 months of data and found the variation appeared only after one software update. He assembled controls, maintenance, production, and quality staff. A technician named Luis reported that operators have been manually correcting one zone near the end of each batch. The adjustment never reached engineering because every batch still passed final inspection. Daniel asked why the correction was necessary. A control valve lagged after the update changed the sequence. The product remained acceptable, but operator intervention concealed a growing actuator problem. The plant wanted to continue until the next scheduled shutdown. Daniel recommended replacing the actuator and validating the control sequence within 48 hours. Production resisted because a customer order was due. "We are still meeting specification," the production director said. "Because operators are correcting a defect the system should control," Daniel replied. "If the actuator worsens during an unattended cycle, the batch may not remain within specification." The dispute reached Claire's operations meeting. Months earlier, she might have demanded a decision based on schedule. This time she asked who owned safety and quality authority, what evidence remained uncertain, and whether employees closest to the line have been heard. Quality supported Daniel's controlled repair. Claire accepted the decision without turning her new listening habit into indecision. The actuator was replaced. Inspection showed internal were approaching failure. The software sequence was corrected, and operator intervention stopped. Harrison met the customer deadline by moving one batch to another qualified line. The apparent success nearly ended the investigation too soon. Daniel asked why the actuator had worn faster. After the software update, controls engineers found the new sequence commanded small, frequent corrections instead of fewer stable movements. The valve accumulated nearly 4 times the expected cycles. The software vendor argued that every command stayed within specifications. Daniel agreed and asked a different question. Had anyone evaluated the total duty cycle created by the new logic? The contract defined command limits, but not cumulative mechanical wear. Harrison and the vendor shared the cost of revising the sequence because both sides had approved incomplete requirements. The new control used a deadband that maintained temperature without constant actuator movement. Engineers verified product quality across 3 test batches before full release. Priya Shah built a dashboard tracking intervention count, valve travel, and temperature stability. Operators reviewed the displays during shift handover. If manual corrections returned, the issue would become visible before the actuator approached failure. The investigation expanded to other software-controlled equipment. 2 pumps and 1 ventilation damper showed similar increases in cycling after updates. None faced immediate failure, but maintenance intervals were adjusted and change reviews improved. The lesson reached the Capital Committee. Software changes were no longer classified as free improvements simply because no hardware purchase occurred. Every change had life cycle effects that required ownership. Daniel credited Luis in the final report for noticing the repeated workaround. Luis received no extravagant award. His annual evaluation recorded the contribution, and he joined future controls reviews during paid hours. The plant did not need another hero. It needed the observation closest to the machine to survive long enough to reach the people authorized to act. During the review, Claire thanked Luis for reporting the manual corrections. Luis admitted he had nearly stayed silent because managers historically treated operator workarounds as proof that the line was fine. Daniel created a register for recurring workarounds. Any manual step required to maintain normal output received an owner and review date. The goal was not to punish improvisation. It was to prevent temporary skill from hiding permanent risk. The successful repair made Daniel visible to senior leadership. A senior mechanical engineering lead role opened 2 months later after the previous lead retired. Human Resources posted it internally and externally. Daniel applied with 6 other candidates. Claire recused herself from the panel because of the recent dispute and her prior error. An external engineering leader joined the assessment. Candidates reviewed a capital project, led a simulated incident, and presented a mentoring plan. Daniel ranked first in incident leadership and second in capital finance. Another internal candidate, Priya Shah, led finance and technical design. The panel chose Daniel by a narrow margin because the role's first-year priorities emphasized plant coordination and technician development. Priya received written feedback and later accepted a project engineering lead role through a separate process. Harrison did not present Daniel's promotion as a reward for forgiving Claire or helping her on the road. Before accepting, Daniel asked whether the lead role required frequent travel. It involved 2 days per month at another site and emergency coverage shared among 4 leaders. He arranged care with Mrs. Alvarez and Emily's grandmother. The higher salary restored savings, but the schedule still had to fit the family responsible for motivating his choices. On his first day as lead, Daniel met with the engineers who had also applied. He acknowledged the competition and asked what support they needed from him. Priya challenged his capital plan during the first meeting. Daniel did not interpret disagreement as resentment. Her revision reduced installation time on a pump project by 1 shift. The team faced another test when an outside contractor missed a shutdown milestone. The old practice allowed contractors to recover schedule through overtime with limited Harrison oversight. Priya warned that the acceleration would place electrical and mechanical crews in the same restricted area. Daniel stopped the overlapping work and required a revised sequence. The contractor claimed Harrison caused the delay. Procurement records showed the contractor had failed to order a required component on time. Daniel documented the issue, negotiated added weekend staffing at the contractor's cost, and preserved separation between crews. The project finished 12 hours late, but without injury. A customer shipment was protected through temporary inventory. Daniel's report credited Priya for identifying the risk before field crews entered the space. Several engineers who had competed for the lead role saw that recognition did not depend on supporting Daniel's first plan. He created a rotating decision review where another engineer challenged assumptions before major shutdowns. The practice reduced blind spots and made disagreement routine rather than personal. Daniel also delegated. His instinct was to answer every mechanical question himself, but leadership coaching showed that constant availability kept others dependent. He assigned equipment ownership, set escalation thresholds, and allowed engineers to complete decisions within clear limits. The team became stronger when Daniel stopped proving he was the best problem solver in every room. Leadership became stronger because people could challenge the person who won. At home, the restored wages and later promotion rebuilt stability slowly. Daniel replenished savings, replaced 2 worn tires, and created a separate account for Emily's future education. He did not describe the money as compensation for suffering. It was income earned through work and wages restored after an improper decision. Emily recovered from the ear infection within days, but she remained interested in the workplace policy created afterward. She designed a school project showing how emergency messages traveled from an employee to a supervisor, human resources, and a backup manager. Her first model used strings and paper cups. If one person failed to lift a cup, the message stopped. Daniel helped her add a second route and a confirmation bell. "Now the person knows someone heard," she said. The project won a classroom award for systems thinking. Daniel did not invite company media or turn it into a Harrison campaign. Emily presented to her classmates where the idea belonged. Their weekly routines remained imperfect. On Daniel's travel days, Emily stayed with her grandmother. One emergency call interrupted a Saturday outing, and another was handled by Priya without Daniel leaving home. Learning not to answer every problem became part of keeping the promise he had made outside the clinic. Mrs. Alvarez continued as an authorized caregiver, and accepted payment for scheduled support despite Daniel's initial reluctance. Reliable care was skilled work, not an informal favor to assume forever. The family had more options, but none removed the need to plan, communicate, and respect the people helping make Daniel's leadership possible. Claire continued coaching and held monthly listening sessions with rotating employees. Participation was paid, questions were submitted anonymously or openly, and commitments were tracked. Early sessions produced long lists of complaints. Some required action, others required explanation. Claire learned that listening did not mean promising agreement. One employee asked why the chief executive officer still received a bonus after violating policy. Claire explained the board's reduction and governance process without sharing confidential numbers. The employee did not appear satisfied. Claire allowed the discomfort to remain. Accountability is not proven because the person being held accountable feels the consequence was enough, she told her coach later. Her relationship with Daniel remained professional. She did not visit his home, contact Emily directly, or use their story in company marketing. When the annual leadership meeting approached, communications proposed presenting Daniel's roadside assistance as evidence of Harrison values. Both Daniel and Claire rejected the idea. The important event was the wrongful termination and the process that changed afterward, Daniel said. Do not turn my choice on the road into a reason the company looks good. Harrison reported policy outcomes instead: notification access, reduced appeals, training completion, and employee feedback. Claire described her error without naming Daniel unless he chose to participate. 1 year after the firing, Daniel agreed to join a panel about fair decision-making with Megan, an hourly technician and employee advocate. Claire moderated only the final questions. Daniel did not offer a speech about kindness solving everything. When I stopped on the road, I did not erase what happened that morning, he said. When I returned to work, I did not promise immediate trust. The company had to correct the record, change the process, and let employees test whether the change lasted. Megan explained why human resources needed authority to pause executive decisions. The technician described how the central notification line worked during a real emergency. The advocate discussed the importance of representation. Claire closed with one sentence. Rules tell us what happened. Fair process makes room to understand why before power decides what comes next. After the panel, Emily waited in the lobby with Mrs. Alvarez. Her ear infection was long gone, and she carried a small robotics project built from recycled parts. Did you tell everyone I made you late? She asked. No, I told them adults needed a better process. Good. Because I was sick, not irresponsible. Claire heard the answer from several feet away. You are correct, she said. Emily recognized her from a company photograph. Are you the lady Dad helped? Yes. I'm also the leader who did not listen first. Did you learn? I'm still proving that. Emily accepted the answer and returned to her robot. Outside, Claire's repaired sedan waited near the entrance. Daniel's pickup was parked several spaces away. No storm, breakdown, or ceremony forced them into the same moment. Their lives had changed through policies, technical decisions, contested meetings, and ordinary follow-through. Daniel had not returned because he was too kind to remain angry. He returned because Harrison corrected the termination, restored what it could, accepted enforceable conditions, and allowed him to choose. Claire did not become a better leader because he rescued her. She became accountable when she stopped treating power as proof that her first judgment was correct. The strongest legacy belonged neither to a promotion nor an apology. It belonged to a workplace where the next employee facing an emergency would be heard before years of service disappeared in 14 minutes. Kindness made Daniel stop on a dark road. Fairness required something more difficult: facts, consent, correction, and systems strong enough to protect people even when the chief executive officer was the person most in need of restraint.